Randy, Anthony, I had the worst experience over the weekend. My HC went out at home and I called the company to come check it out. And we live in a high rise. There's an air handler in my unit. They come in and they figure out that the switch that turns it on and off has burned out. And the guy looks at it and says, this unit's 10 years old, your air handler, and it's going to be hard to get this switch. It's like a $50 switch and it'll take months to get it. I was like, that's impossible. There is no way. This is a Johnson Control System, massive company. He's like, yeah, it'll take months. They may have to make one from scratch just for you. I was like, well, what do you suggest? He's like, well, I don't know. I was like, are you saying I have to get a brand new air handling unit just to fix this switch? He's like, let me call my supervisor. Calls the supervisor. He's like, yeah, I can schedule an appointment to come get you a quote on a new unit. Finally, I was like, no way. So I went to AI. I plugged everything in. There's a $50 switch available, original equipment. It's going to arrive today. I can promise you that company won't be the company putting it in. Zero ability to solve a problem, zero ability to diagnose how to do things from him and allegedly his supervisor. Man, I was really put off by this. How does this happen?
There are so many reasons why that could have happened to you. It could be as simple as, I'm going to make a commission if I sell this guy a $10,000 unit, instead of a $40 part, or just sheer incompetence. Who knows? An example in running a company was wrong. And it goes back to Sears. In 1960, Sears had 800 stores. In 2002, when they started to really decline, they had the same 800 stores. They'd opened a couple here and there, but for all intents and purposes, the real estate was the real estate. And I remember being in a meeting with the CEO at the time, Arthur Martinez, in 1998, when he said, quote, well, Walmart can't expand any more than they have. Okay. And at that time, I think they had, 800 stores, and I think they have 3,000 now. So the thinking was, well, we don't need any more stores. We just need to spruce up the place and maybe buy a company like Land's End and put in new products. When in fact, the problem was location. And Walmart and Target and Kohl's and Home Depot and Lowe's, they all expanded into the suburbs where communities were growing. And Sears wasn't. So when she had to go shopping, or he had to go shopping, they had to drive by all those places to get to a Sears. Well, if time is valuable, made no sense. So the company literally went out of business because they didn't want to solve the real problem. The real problem was location. They kept they kept just chasing what they thought what the problem was, instead of admitting, look, we got to do something here, and we got to go toe to toe with these other companies if we're going to survive.
Well, sometimes the problem we're trying to solve isn't the actual real problem. Like that particular problem was a customer experience problem. By the way, Walmart now 10,900 stores today, and so so really, I think people are oftentimes aimed at the wrong finish line. And for my problem this weekend, it was either incompetence or bad incentives, but either one of those things is terrible.
Yeah, it's also, I think so many times people solve the symptom, right? And sometimes it's just a listening thing. And it's simple. It could be the symptom. It could be empathy. Like, frankly, for people listening, John lives in Austin, Texas. I mean, it's been 100 degrees every day. Not having air conditioning at 100 degrees, like having a little bit of empathy, like you should want to fix that quickly if you're in that business. Like that's a way that you get referrals, get repeat business, get good word of mouth. And I'm guessing, like, I didn't even think about what Anthony said about they could just want a commission on a $10,000 unit. That might be a real thing, right? But they're thinking about what their needs, not the customer, which will bite them in the long run. But I just think oftentimes we solve problems by fixing the symptom, and we're constantly playing a game of whack-a-mole and not getting down to the core problem or the first principles, which I think is difficult for a lot of people.
I'll say this, my daughter got sick years ago. This is probably going back, 10, 15 years. And she had a fever and the doctor diagnosed it and gave her an antibiotic. And then 2 weeks later, she had exactly the same symptoms. And I called the doctor to get a refill on the medicine. And the doctor was like, nope, not doing it. Must bring her in for diagnosis. And I was so angry. so angry because it was exactly the same symptoms. And they went through all the diagnosis. It was a totally different root cause with a totally different set of treatments. And I'd have taken her down the exact wrong track had I not been, forced down the correct diagnosis. And so I have a lot of gratitude for that doctor. But man, I was torqued off at the time, right until they showed me like, hey, we actually would have done harm if we'd used that other way of treating just symptoms.
All have the hero syndrome where, we see something occurring in front of us, and we're we're built to respond. And so we quickly respond to it. And this happens in our monthly meeting all the time. We're solving people's problems, what we believe to be the problem. And to your point, Randy, it's just a symptom. It can be as simple as, in a business, hey, our sales are down. And then someone will jump up, well, we need to get new salespeople. Or we need to, have a meeting and coach them up. When you know, some further diagnosis, you might find, well, shoot, there's a competitor in the market that's selling the same product that's better and less expensive, and we're not paying attention to it, or we know it's there, but we're not going to admit that their product is better, or we will say it's cheap. In the window business, there are less expensive vinyl windows of not great quality. Well, it turns out customers really kind of are okay with that. So, you just have to, either you sell your value, or they buy a $5,000 package instead of your $10,000 package, so you got to admit, what the issue really is.
So let's
And it
hold on.
takes discipline.
Let's dig into that, Anthony.
Okay.
So you've got a $10,000 window package. Somebody else has a 5,000 that's lesser quality, right? So what most people do is they go, well, we can't compete on price, and they kind of whine about it and they complain, or they lower their prices, right? What is the solution here? Let's talk about how do you solve that problem?
Well, you have to know who you are, right? So we can give a very specific example here. You have to know who you are, and you have to know where the customer's coming from. What's most important to the customer. What that guy never asked John was, well, what's really important to you? And John would have said, I need my air conditioning, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get my air conditioning unit working. I need a solution. And, knowing who you are is, well, Mrs. Jones, our windows cost more money, and here's the reason why. They last longer, they have higher R ratings, and they're built to last, and we warrant them for life, and so on and so on and so on. And if that's not important to you, then I do suggest you buy the cheap Home Depot windows. And just that, you're not going to get 100% market share in any business you're in, unless you're the government. There's no such thing as 100% market share. So
But that's how you build trust. That's how you build trust, right? Like I had a couple of people in the professional services world that told me when they couldn't do something, even though it would have been to their benefit to try financially. And those are the people that I went back to time and time again. This company that came out this week, I immediately called my building manager this morning. They're no longer on the board for the building in terms of like who's going to call them out. Like they've already been pulled off the building like spec sheet for who gets called out. And it's like, if once this whole thing is resolved, I may put some pretty negative reviews online, which I never do.
And yeah, Anthony, when you're talking about the window thing, my thought process is how do I get in front of the right people? Because you said customers don't care, but is that true? Some customers care.
yeah,
You sold
you have to
millions
know,
and millions
you
of
have to,
dollars worth of windows, millions every month.
yeah.
So some
I'm
customers
not
care.
saying customers don't care. Listen, in some cases, it's all they can afford, and they need new windows. And something is better than what they have, and that's all they can afford, and that's okay. And that goes for everything. Her problem is solved, and that's a good thing. There's more than one solution. So
I had a conversation this morning with a group of salespeople about repeat business, and we kind of talked about this very thing. Like they needed to look at it and say, okay, why am I not getting enough repeat business for the people that aren't? Is it because you don't have a good enough service and people are unhappy? Is it because you're over promising and under delivering? Is it because the price is too high? Right? I mean, I had a situation once where I had a salesperson and I had all this repeat contractor business that came in every month, and he started raising the price. And when I brought it up, he's like, "Well, they're paying it." And I stupidly go, "Oh, he's right. They are paying it. I'm making bigger margins," and I let him go with it. Well, guess what? One by one, I lost all of my repeat business, and I called them back, and some were like, "Your prices have gotten out of control. I've been working with you for 5 years, but now, like, you're overcharging." And so, yes, they paid it once. Some of them paid it twice, 3 times, but eventually I pretty much lost. And, most of that business I never got back because I let him. So I was thinking about the wrong problem. It's like, oh, he solved margins, but I didn't really
Well,
think about down the road.
I think you really honed in on something, Randy. Like you went, and it wasn't until you talked to somebody that you figured that out. And I think that's the problem solving is like people often think, well, it could be A, B, or C. They assume which one it is and they go with that before they validate it, right? Before they actually figure out like what's the actual data, and people jump ahead, myself included sometimes. And so I think that's the part of it, like asking why 5 times to find a root cause is it's time consuming, but we forget that it can save more time by going through root cause analysis correctly than it does solving the problem the wrong way than having to solve it a second or a third time.
This is so hard for people, though. People, like, instinctively, they're worried about what they're saying, right? And they're thinking about what they're going to say next and how they're going to do it instead of really listening. And even before listening, like you'd said, just asking the right questions to make sure they are solving the right problem, right? And going down the right path. And that's a skill that I think everybody should be working on. I mean, myself included. Like, it's just, I'm better at it than I used to be, but there's still a lot of room for improvement.
There's a lot of risk in raising your hand and saying this could be a problem. I was in a meeting at one time at Sears and I got in a heap of trouble on it because the apparel person, we all reported to the CEO and chairman, and the apparel person was talking about, well, Easter came a little late and we had some weather issues and, we had, some product didn't get to the right stores and so on and so forth because of the weather and this, that, and the other thing. And so we were reporting sales down year over year while Kohl's and Target and others were reporting sales up. And I just stupidly blurted out, does Kohl's have different weather than we do? Not really the right thing to say in a room
Why
full
not?
of C-suite executives, but
Why not?
she was talking about, she was making excuses because she didn't want to be, on the hot seat, so
But why wasn't that the right comment, Anthony? Like, is
it
that
was
a cultural
inappropriate.
wrong comment?
It was inappropriate. It might have been something that could have been framed differently.
Okay, so
Could have
delivery
said,
was
maybe we
bad.
need to get
Content was
snow
right.
tires on our trucks or something. I don't know. It was the right thing to say. It was just in the wrong room.
Like, was that really the problem?
The weather was not the problem.
Right. No, but that was the question. The question could have been, "Hey, is weather really the problem here?"
Yeah. It could
Right.
have asked it that way, but I was
Or
a
what is
smart aleck young guy, and
what's the difference between us and Kohl's would be another
Right.
way to ask it, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
that would have been a different way to ask it.
I like your way of asking it though better, just for
Yeah.
the record.
It makes
that's
for a good
I
story 25 years later, but
I think that's a great point that I didn't consider before we prepped for today's call is, the way that problem solving can feel for people matters, right? And so if you introduce shame or guilt or embarrassment, it's going to be harder to get to the real reason for people than by making sure you work hard to wring shame, embarrassment, and guilt out of the situation. Very difficult to problem solve when those are a part of the environment that you're solving in.
sometimes, you make a commitment to something and you just keep pushing it. You think you're on the right track, so in fairness, she probably thought she had the right apparel in place. They thought they made good buying decisions. The stores were remodeled beautifully and all that. And so you keep, pouring the same effort into the same thing that is not giving you the results. I'll give you a really good example. At Intuit, we bought in the mid 2000s, I want to give it to you, pre-iPhone, we bought a check company. So this company processed checks. So you write a check, you could slide it through a reader, and it would go to the check company, and then money would go to your bank account. So we spent ungodly amount of money integrating it with QuickBooks. So now you put the check into the machine, it automatically uploads to your general ledger, and then it goes off to your bank, and so on and so forth. Okay. An hour after we got all that solved, okay, risk management, the systems, some guy named Steve Jobs introduces the iPhone. And 20 minutes after that, every bank in America has got remote deposit, right? And so we solved the problem, but it was an elegant solution to a problem that suddenly went away. So best intentions, did a good job, but life is technology sometimes gets in the way. So yeah, it's another example where, it's just the way things go.
Well, this makes me think back. I worked for an internet company during the dot-com boom and bust. And when I started out, they had no idea how to market this. And the whole problem that they were trying to solve is, how do we get more users? And they had tried everything under the sun, including regular marketing and magazine ads and radio ads. And they had just thrown money, and they were hemorrhaging money, this company. And they brought in 19 of us that started this new division to be on-campus marketing. It was called collegeclub.com. It was Facebook long before Facebook, frankly. And the problem we were solving is, how do we get more people signed up to the website? How do we get more users? And we went out and they set up a pay plan, and 19 of us failed miserably. Not one person was getting good results. But pretty soon we figured something out, and we started giving away freebies. We did all these things. And eventually, with 19 smart people, we cracked it. And then they were like, oh, so by the way, for the first 6 months, we didn't make diddly. We were so underpaid, it was ridiculous. Then once we started cracking this, they're like, oh, we're paying these guys too much. And they changed our comp plan, right? And we got a different comp plan. Then they gave us a new comp plan, then we cracked that. And now we had 40 people and 65 people, because what we were doing, all of a sudden we're growing, but they kept changing our comp plan. Then pretty soon they realized the incentives were all wrong, because they were incentivizing us for signups. And back then, internet wasn't what it is now. We would set up laptops and people would sign up, but not actually go to the website. And we counted on them to go back to their apartment or their dorm room and log on to the site again, which most of them didn't. But we were just mass signing people up, just like crazy. And again, they're like, oh, they're making too much money. We got to change this. So now they made the problem, we need active users, right? Because they finally realized they were solving the wrong problem. Well, we figured that out. Then when we started getting a bunch more money, and we had all this money coming in from Sony and General Motors and all these companies were investing, they started doing radio ads, which they'd already proven didn't work, right? And they did all these, Rolling Stone for spin details. For those of you young people, they were a big deal 25 years ago or 7 years ago. But they just kept solving the wrong problem. And the whole thing was to get public. And this is really sad, because this should be a $1 trillion company today. Like we were way ahead of Facebook, and way more features than Facebook had in years, and they ran it in the ground. And then when the rush was to get public, nobody thought about getting the books right. Like, they ended up not going public because the bookkeeping was screwed up. And then the bubble burst, and these guys just never solved the right problem. But even rushing to get public, there was still a focus on users, and nobody ever talked about making money. And it's really a shame. Like, with better problem solving and better first principles of what are we solving for, we would have survived, and there'd be a lot of billionaires out of that company that ended up getting nothing.
Randy, it's interesting because they might have been great at problem solving, but not at choosing the right problem to solve. So I think there's kind of two issues there. Like, what is the right problem to solve? And then how do you solve that problem? Because they may have taken a problem A and solved problem A correctly, exactly the way we said they should, but problem A was never the right problem to solve.
Yeah. Well, and the way they solved it, which was really good, was free market. They would give us a comp plan. And by the end, we had 65 or 70 people across the country. We had 65 or 70 people to go out and run their own little experiments and learn from each other. And somebody would figure something out in San Francisco that would help somebody in Omaha, that would help somebody in Austin, that would help somebody in Dallas, that would help somebody in Miami, right? And we were all communicating and everybody was getting better every month. It was really good at that. But yeah, great point, John. I mean, they were just never figured out what problem was trying to be solved.
Yeah. I hear that a lot, people in companies where I do a lot of consulting work, something comes up and they try to solve the problem and the process that created the problem at the same time. And they try to fix both those things with one solution. And that's almost always a recipe for disaster. So it's like, let's solve the problem first and then go back and figure out whether or not the process needs to get solved. And then if it does, you can solve the process separately. But when you take three problems and try to solve all of them with a single solution, you generally get a solution that's bad for all three.
You gotta, there's so many great examples and methodologies to determine what the right problem is to solve, right? And sometimes you got to be able to pivot very quickly. I just reading an article today about the most sought after companies to invest in by Silicon Valley investors are companies that got started by founders who have pivoted away from their original idea. So they may have decided they, started a company and they're going to be this particular niche of AI or something or whatever it might be, or this particular product that we want to produce and sell, but they've shelved it and they've moved on to something else because it didn't work. So the investor's saying, this is great. We know exactly what he or she's not going to do. And they're willing to have pivoted into something else. Let's bet on this cowboy. Really interesting dynamic that I didn't, as I think about it, I think back to my days at Toyota where, we had, the Toyota production system, the problem solving system, Kaizen, and we had a million different tools and methodologies, but it always came down to plan, do, check, and act. And the planning was all about identifying a problem you wanted to solve. Doing was trying 1 or 10 different things to have an impact on that problem. Checking was really looking at the data. Were the actions that I took, did it move the needle? And then act was, okay, we've got our answer, we're putting it in place, and now this is the way we do things. So it sounds simple, but going all the way back to plan, identifying that right problem, what should be happening? What should be happening in this situation? Is it material that it isn't happening? And then if the answer to that is yes, can it be changed?
Anthony, why were you so good at that at Toyota? And then why is it that it's more inconsistent for you with more experience than it was back then? Or is it more consistent now?
It's the way I think I'm still consistent with it. I mean, it was drilled into me. I went from Sears where we had Six Sigma. Then I went to Toyota where they had Toyota production system. It's like being in the military. They're teaching me to shoot, man. This is what you do. Six Sigma was more of a process oriented thing. How do we change a process? Toyota was, looking at, they always were looking at the throughput. What's the end? Where are we right now with the end result? How do we make that better? So it was kind of a working backwards thing. So it was just drilled into me. And now it's more, in the smaller business that I had more control over things. So it was more instinctual, and in the beginning, I remember, John, and you remember this, we tried to teach our 6 employees, 15 years of training that I had and you had. That didn't go over very well. So we had to kind of just live it, and really not try to train people. it came down to the questions. You'd ask people why. Why, and that was really the foundation of how we ran the last business we had. So yeah, and sometimes your instinct is going to take over, and you're just going to do something because it's instinctual. And I think at this point I'm right more than I'm wrong, but you still got to do the checking part.
You guys have both done a great job at your companies of having environments where it's okay to make mistakes and bring up failures, even your own. Like, what are the things each of you have done in your companies to make it a culture where you do want to grow and you can make mistakes without that embarrassment, guilt, or shame?
I think for me, it's my mindset. Like I almost look for that type of stuff because I view it as a growth opportunity, right? And look, I'm like everybody else. I don't like people telling me I'm wrong or this is stupid or whatever. And there's an ego play here. I think for me, it's less of an issue than it is most people because I value the growth and I see it as an opportunity, and I think that other people see that, and I'm willing to say, oh, we screwed this up, and I'm willing to make changes and be nimble. I mean, John, you've pointed out sometimes I'm far too willing. I mean, the downside for me, I'm too willing to change things and move too fast. But I do think that having that willingness makes it's contagious throughout the organization.
Yeah, I approach it a little bit differently. I mean, later, early in my career, I would, like that poor lady in the CEO office, I would be more abrupt. But I learned to separate and distinguish between errors of omission and errors of commission. An error of omission could be, I'm going to try to pick up this door by myself because we got to get this truck loaded, and I got to make it happen. No one's around, and the window or the door falls and breaks. Yeah, it's a mistake. Shouldn't have happened. The problem was you didn't have enough help. Okay. But you were trying. Commission is the truck driver taking that window and driving 90 miles an hour in a 60-mile-an-hour zone on a curvy highway or a roadway, and the window falling down on the truck and smashing. Okay? There's a big difference between those two mistakes, right? One is I committed the mistake. I knew this was not the right way to do it. And the other was I was trying to help. So once you have those distinctions, then you treat the incident, if you will, much differently. One guy's going to get right up, the other guy's going to get a hug and say, "Hey, next time, dude, use the lift or get someone to help you. Don't try to do that on your own." The other guy, might not have a job at the end of the week. So yeah, I think you have to make a decision on, why was it committed? What caused the mistake?
One
Early,
one guy's trying to make it better for the customer, one guy's trying to make it better for themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That good way to sum it up.
that's really well said. John, early you said, why do smart people get this wrong? And something that's been on my mind because I've heard this on 3 or 4 different podcasts in the last 2 weeks talking about AI regulation. And I probably heard 10 people talk about this. Probably 7 or 8 of them are billionaires. They're all high level, really smart people. And I think every single one of them is wrong. And I think to me, it's like the most obvious thing. Now, maybe that's arrogance on my part, but so the problem they're trying to solve for is how do we keep us safe in an AI world? How do we keep AI how do we keep it from creating chemical weapons, or how do we keep it from hacking all of our systems and taking them down? And the answer that they all come to is some form of regulation. Now, they have different versions of regulation. Most, like Dario and the Anthropic team, are like, yes, government, come regulate us. And that never ends well. It doesn't. Like I heard David Sachs talking about this over the weekend, and he was talking about, like, Dario asked for an AI version of the FAA. And I'd never heard this, but it takes, and my numbers might be a little off, John, you're great at fact checking me as on the fly here, but I believe he said to get a new airplane approved through the FAA, it's 5 to 9 or 6 to 9 years to get a new airplane design. And I started thinking about it, I'm like, well, crap. The planes I fly on are the same planes that when I was a kid. Like, think about all the technology we've had. Well, no wonder nobody comes out with new airplane designs, right? They've completely shut it down. And I believe then if you submit a design, it takes 6 to 9 or 5 to 9 years to get it through. It then takes another 3 to 5 years if you want to edit or change something on the design. Well, they were trying to solve a problem to make airplanes safer, but I would question if you don't allow people to do new designs and use new stuff, are you really making them safer in the long run? Right? Like you're probably making it less safe. And we can't have that with AI. And I would also say that with AI, it's impossible because people don't think about second and third level and fourth level effects. If they did this, and even if it took 6 months to get something through, and I find it hard to believe the US government could make it move in 6 months, but even if they did, we will be so far behind. One, China will be kicking our butt, but the best AI people, they'll leave. They won't stay here. Look at Europe. Europe's best AI people have all left Europe, and we've benefited, and China's benefited in other places. They will go somewhere that doesn't have that regulation where they can be on the cutting edge, because 6 months is a lifetime in that industry. And that's just, I could go on about this. This hits home with me with sovereignty and everything else, but the problem they're solving is how to make it safe. And
Yeah, I guess safe for who? This goes back to, are you solving the right problem, right? Because, at the end of the day, us slowing down AI in the Western world, whether it's the US or, a group of countries, doesn't mean that our geopolitical competitors are going to slow down on their side. And then you're actually creating a disadvantage, right? And I think that, to your point, right, that's just a different way of saying what you said. And so I think, we go back to what is the problem that's trying to be solved. And so if safety is an issue, right, then I think building, measures that show safety might be a better way than slowing down development, right? And I think you can get, typically when you look at regulation over the history of time for technology, regulation by the government is almost the last step in most cases. And it's the groups that are doing the innovating that propose the right set of regulations and safety guardrails. But I think it's hard to put the genie back in the bottle or the toothpaste back in the tube, depending on which metaphor you like better.
well, in this case, I am almost 100% convinced that Dario, the Anthropic CEO, who, by the way, all these people running these frontier models, with the exception of Elon and the Google people, but they weren't CEOs. They don't really have any experience. They're coders that are doing this, and they don't have that business experience. But I'm almost positive what he's trying to do is he thinks he gets the regulation, the government's going to regulate it. And you hear these, just over the weekend, Kimmy 3.5 or whatever number came out that's supposed to be on par with Fable is a free open source from China. Okay. Well,
Now Fable's available for everybody, by the way. You saw they
yeah.
reacted to that by it's great.
Yeah, I've been using the crap out of it, but they are like 1% of the price per token that Claude charges. Well, if I could charge 100 times as much, I would love the government to put a moat around so I could keep charging 100x and block these open source to give me a competitive. I think he's trying to create that moat through regulation. I think it's very short-sighted, and it's not going to end well if it happens. But I also think the industry is moving so fast that, ironically, I think the Chinese open source models are going to save us from ourselves. I heard somebody say, I'm copying somebody else that said this, and they said from capitalism. That's not capitalism. Like that's the opposite of capitalism, to be clear, is creating that regulatory moat. But I think it's pissing in the wind trying to do
I
what
think
they're trying
you
to do.
also have to be honest and ask yourself, is the Chinese government subsidizing that to get access to our data as part of an intelligence campaign? And I think that it would be, I don't know the answer to it, but a reasonable conclusion might be yes.
Yeah, well, to get back to what problem are you trying to solve? You're not trying to solve, you know, breaking into your bank account or chemical weapons. The problem to solve is, how do you prevent bad actors from being bad actors, right? That's the problem you have to solve. I mean, the internet today, look at what's going on with inside of Facebook and Instagram. We've got pedophile rings running on, through the internet. The bad actors are going to be bad actors. So you have to figure out who the bad actors are and stop them. How the hell are you going to do that? The federal government's going to do that? Are you kidding me? It's just not going to happen. So if you have a product, you have to design it in such a way that that can't happen. Because if Anthropic doesn't do the work and someone uses their product to break into everyone's bank account, Anthropic's not going to exist. So,
But the government, but if they lay that off to the government, they can reduce their risk and say that was the government's job, not mine.
right,
Like we just have
exactly.
we have to get. I just think there's a more honest conversation to be had about all of this.
That's what I'm saying. If no business is going to want to release code, produce a product that's dangerous. Okay, if they release a product that's dangerous and the government had signed off on it, then they're right in the clear. Boeing probably doesn't care that it takes 5 years to get a plane approved because, well, you approved it, you approved the design, you saw it, and the fact that it crashes, 1 out of 3 times, that's kind of on you. So, maybe that's, I don't know where this leads us. I'm not sure there's any solution to this discussion, but nonetheless, the problem isn't the software. The problem is the bad actor in the first place.
That's true with every technology throughout history, right? I mean, fire is this great thing, but people have also used it as a weapon, right? And burned people alive. And we could talk about any technology that way. So
Let's go
I
back
just
to
think-
problem solving, though. Let's get back to the problem solving thing, which is like, if I'm trying to solve problems, what's the first thing I need? Like, I see a problem. What should I do first?
For
Well,
me,
you see a problem. So you're past the point where this is the problem I need to solve. Let's just make that assumption. Now, what's the next step?
well, hold on. I think you're skipping over. Usually I'm the one that's guilty of hand waving over stuff. For me, the thing that people skip over here is identifying the right problem. Like most people, I think they take, here's my past experience, here's my assumptions, this is what we should solve, and it's based on what they've done in the past. But oftentimes they're not solving the right problem. Just like when I was at College Club, they were like, oh, instead of just signing people up, we need active users. Instead of trying to figure out, oh, we actually have to be profitable to stay in business long term, or we're going to run out of money. And that could be anything, but I think it's getting to the core problem, which one, you have to think about second, third, fourth level. You got to slow down, almost like your 5 whys, Anthony, and get to that. But I also think there's testing. Like a lot of times I think about things and I'm like, well, God, it could be one of these 3 things. If we go back to your window example, right? And people aren't selling the window. Is it because our salespeople need to be better? Is it because our marketing has to target a different customer, or is it something else?
Or the product is the wrong product.
Right. I mean, it probably could be multiple other things. I'm not saying this is easy, by the way. I'm saying this is a skill set that A, most people haven't worked on, and B, so to me, the most important thing is figuring out, are you solving the right problem that's actually going to get you the results you want? And maybe that's the first step to your question, John, is what's the outcome I'm looking for is probably before, like a lot of times that'll clarify what problem should be solved as well.
You got to get your hands dirty to discover what the real problem is. At Toyota, they have a term called Gemba, Gemba, which effectively means get your ass out of the chair and go down on the factory floor and observe. Okay, go sit next to the guy installing the audio systems. That's taking 20 minutes longer than we had projected. Right? Go sit with your accountant, sit with your bookkeeper, and watch how they're doing their GEJs. Go get in the warehouse and figure out why that kid dropped the window or the door. What happened? Get into the mix of the business, and get out of your chair and stop talking about things and go observe. Okay, observation is critically important. Whether you're observing a spreadsheet, you're observing what ads are being run, you're observing how you're backing into the warehouse with a tractor trailer, all those things. You got to get out and see things wherever it is. Once you do that and you experience it, then you can start to determine, is this really a problem? I'll use the Intuit example. Intuit had over 100 people on staff that traveled all over the country and sat next to people while they used QuickBooks and TurboTax. And they watched them. They sat next to them day after day. They called it not ride-alongs. They called it something home.
Follow me home. There's a follow me home.
Follow me home. Follow me home. Thank you. And they would watch people. What part of the screen did they look at first? Or what were they looking for? They were looking for a particular data item, so they put it in the right place on the screen that made the most sense. I mean, it was you couldn't get closer to a customer. You couldn't get closer to the actual act of doing something. And again in Japan, this is how they work. The executives in their suit and ties are in the factories. They're eating lunch with the workers. They're asking them questions. What was hard today? What could we do that would make it easier? And then most importantly, they empower people. They empower people to raise questions, to seek solutions, to test things. It's an active developing organism, is the way I like to describe it. It's really alive, and they can try something. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Many, many times though, and again, solving a problem doesn't mean you have to change the world. Sometimes it's just a slight incremental adjustment to get the movement that you're looking for, right? So it doesn't have to be an earth-shattering discovery. You don't have to discover quantum physics. Sometimes it's just, you know what? This ad's running better than that ad, so let's go full bore with that ad. You know what I mean?
It's why the CEO of Four Seasons allowed every single employee to spend $2,000 to solve one of their guests' problems and really change their culture. So guys, let's wrap this up. Randy, help us put a bow on this.
I think a lot of this is just people need to know this is a skill set. It's an area that all of us, with maybe very, very, very few exceptions, need to improve upon. And it's not necessarily easy. And it could be ego. I love what Anthony just said about, sitting beside people and doing it. I literally am working on a software project. I did that this morning. And the person that did it, I said, okay, where would you click first? Because I want this to be intuitive. And they're about the fifth person I've showed this to. Everybody else, it was intuitive where to click first. This person had a different idea. And my first impression was, well, it's obvious. Well, clearly it wasn't, right? So now I have to think about, how do I redesign this so their eyes do go to the right place? Even if it can't be 80%, I needed to get closer to 100% of the people where, it goes to the right place. So that's ego. My first thing was, well, I designed this better and this person's stupid. I didn't really think they're stupid, but that's kind of what I thought. And then it's, but so work on the skill. That would be, that's my thing is we all just need to get better at it.
There's lots out there. There's lots of systems, Six Sigma, the Kaizen, there's 100, 5 Whys. Like there's just a ton of things out there that help with this for sure. Anthony, closing thoughts?
I would say I just advise people to be sure before you start on solutions that you are in fact solving a problem that needs to be solved. And I'll leave the conversation with my favorite problem solving that I think to this day is still was and is a waste of time, and that's the electronic boarding pass. Extremely elegant solution to a problem that really doesn't exist. The fact that we have this technology that allows you to put your boarding pass on a phone sounds great, but the amount of expense and security and cost that goes into that to maintain that system at each and every one of these airlines is tremendous. Where there was no problem printing that stupid thing on your home printer, or when you got to the airport, it worked. It works exactly the same way. Tens and tens of millions of dollars are spent annually on that system, when a $500 printer next to each agent works just as well. So in your business and in your life, be sure you're solving a problem that really does need to be addressed, that it is going to move the needle for you. That's where you should spend most of your time, is determining, is this really a problem? And if I fix it, what's the upside gain going to get me versus the downside loss of time and money to fix it? So.
All right, there we have it. So guys, we'll be right back with the abundance briefing. If you guys are still here, come back after the break. We've got some great things happening out in the world today we'll be talking about right afterwards. In the meantime, while you're waiting for us during the break, like, subscribe, tell a couple friends.
There are tales of abundance. We know that fitness is just as important as money or milestones. It's one of our key 5Fs. For lots of us, taking care of my body while I build my life is one of the more time-consuming and difficult goals to chase. That's why we're partnering with AG1. It's a daily drinkable habit. Less than a minute, that's formulated with 75 plus vitamins and nutrients and designed to support energy, digestion, and immune defense. It even has a few grams of protein that we're all chasing these days. And if you want to try it with our affiliate link, you'll also receive a free AG1 flavor sampler, plus vitamin D3 plus K2 with your welcome kit when you first subscribe, a $72 value. Go to shop.drinkag1.com/tales.
Welcome back. Abundance briefing. First topic. I love this one. A 12-year-old entrepreneur has started his own 3D printing business that runs 70 to 90% margins. Aaron, sorry if I'm going to butcher your last name, Aaron. Aaron Osiris of Atlanta, Georgia. He borrowed $600 from his parents at 12 years old, and he bought a 3D printer and launched it with his brother. And he noticed at school that his friends were all playing with like these fidget spinners and other things like that, and just various toys. So he started printing them, and basically one day prints them. They sells them for $5 each. His margins run 70 to 80%. I just think this is cool. I think it's a cool world we live in. What do you guys think? Well, tell me your thoughts on that.
He's got good parents. I mean, really, the parents, everyone needs support. You got to have support. Sometimes you get it quickly. Sometimes it takes time, and many times you don't get it at all. And that crushes innovation in a lot of ways. So good on the parents that let them have the $600. Good on the parents that they're supporting them, they're giving them the time to do it. And good on him in terms of the effort, that he'll have competition. We'll see how he reacts, because he's got no moat around him, that's for sure, in terms of the product that he's selling. But it's great that their technology lets people do things. I was just reading an article about some of the younger Gen Z guys and gals, and even some Gen X. They're borrowing money from the SBA, their parents, sometimes banks, and they're buying up old school businesses like air conditioning companies and plumbing businesses, and they're in a market, and they're competing with the hedge funds who are doing this. So they'll go into a town or a county and buy 2 or 3 of these businesses and put them together and leverage the technology into one, and suddenly we have entrepreneurs spinning up all over the place. So I think it's terrific, and hopefully that stuff like that will continue.
Yeah, I just think it's a abundant world when the kid can go buy a $500 3D printer, start a business, start throwing off some cash every week. I think that's pretty cool. I love the hustle. So good job, Aaron. John, let's move on to one that's right in your wheelhouse here.
Yeah.
GLP-1 drugs. They're the question is, are they leading to a longer life? Everybody talks about them for the weight loss, right? But now there's research talking about, is it increasing life expectancy? And I know the other question that, I think both Anthony and I have, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Anthony, but is it, are you losing muscle, and what are the consequences of that? So you are, this is right in your wheelhouse. Talk to us.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that when you are using a GLP-1, if you're not doing resistance training, then your body pulls energy both from muscle cells and from fat cells. But if you're doing resistance training and you're building more muscle, the muscles are going to hold on to their energy, and you're going to have more fat reduction, and you're going to have less muscle loss. But that resistance training, so lifting heavy weight, is a really important part of the regimen when you're taking a GLP-1 for sure.
I mean,
So how do people monitor that? not everyone can go get body scans and things like that. So, you know, I struggle with this because, and I have some people in my life that have, battled weight their whole lives. You know, the result of losing weight feels really good,
Mhm.
and if it's an achievement after a long, hard life of being overweight. So are they really going to pay attention to the second part of this, which is the resistance training, or are they just going to be happy with the weight loss and losing muscle mass and skeletal mass and things like that? That's going to shorten your life. It's not going to lengthen your life. So you might be skinny, but you're going to die younger. And
Yeah, I
so
mean, you're talking with a level of certainty that I would say science hasn't actually proven out. So maybe that's true, Anthony. But if you're really overweight and you lose weight, then I mean, you're talking about a lot of variables where doctors would say we don't have longitudinal data, and losing the weight is going to have some benefit, but losing muscle is a problem. And the older you get, the harder it is to put muscle on. That's a known thing. And so, step one is get people moving and doing the cardiovascular work to manage the metabolic challenges they have. Step two is adding resistance training to that GLP. And, there are some patients that we work with inside of our practice where we've got to have them, get, MSK clearance for their, muscular skeletal doctors, whether it's an orthopedic surgeon, podiatrist, whoever. They may have to work with a physical trainer or even a physical therapist to kind of get into that system. But the reality is that if you're using muscles in a resistance training, you're going to either retain or build muscle. And, high level, the way that things work is you store energy inside of fat cells and inside skeletal muscle. And then when the liver needs energy back when you're not consuming food, it's going to draw from both of those stores. But if your muscles are using the energy, they're going to say, whoa, 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 like take it from the fat, we're keeping ours, right? And the more muscle you have, the better that is. And so that happens by doing things, very generally speaking, that make you sore.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, and you're talking about patients that are, maybe extremely overweight. I'm more worried about the recreational use of GLPs. I mean, that's what I'm more worried about. I mean, this has become, you know, the next version of anorexia. You know, people who don't really need to lose any weight, very little weight, are turning to these things as a shortcut, and I'm just concerned that
Yeah, I got to call it. Yeah. So I hear the intent of what you're saying. I got to be careful medically because anorexia is actually a mental health issue that has a very different set of underlying causes. But what you're saying is that people are relying on the GLP-1 as a crutch for something maybe and not actually doing the other side of it. And that's true too. And so I think for people that want to lose 5 pounds and want to use a GLP, awesome. I think that can be clinically indicated for some people. I would say that for people that we talk to in our practice, we talk really at length about where resistance training plays a role, and not having resistance training plays a role has a consequence to it. And I think that's the thing that I think people need to be really well informed. I think that's the real key. And so anytime we sensationalize this, I think I'm not psyched about it. What I am psyched about is making sure everyone's got all the data, all the information, and they learn how to weave all of that into the lifestyle that's going to work for them in the long term.
John, what's the impact on bone loss? I know it impacts muscle, but does it impact bone or no? I have no idea.
Yeah, not directly, not in the way they talk about muscle loss. And the reason you talk about muscle loss is because you're eating less calories, right, than you're consuming. And so what happened, and you're slowing down the process of digestion. And so what happens is your body's drawing energy from those stores in the state that, that you're drawing energy from the muscles, not putting it into the muscles and into the fat. And so the liver really doesn't care where it gets the energy from, right? It's just going to grab where it can grab. So you really want your muscles holding on to it and saying, no, I'm not going to give that up. And that way it draws from the fat more than it draws from the muscle.
I have another question. So you've probably seen the picture of like Demi Moore recently on the red carpet, and she kind of looks, I don't know, not great, like all the muscles gone. Are those pictures real? I guess here's what I'm thinking. I don't trust the media. Like I watched them a few years ago, literally change Joe Rogan, the color of his face and doctor the picture, and I've done it over and over. But I just got done watching Landman. It couldn't have been that long ago. She didn't look unhealthy, but now they're showing a picture of her. I mean, is that a real thing, do you think, or is that just the media doctoring it, trying to get clicks.
I mean, you would never think the media would do something just to get clicks and advertising dollars. That would never happen. I don't know what's going on with Demi Moore, not a patient in our practice, can't speak to it intelligently. And I certainly know that the media does to change pictures to get kind of their stuff going on. However, there is something that people have called Ozempic face, where people lose weight too quickly and it is unhealthy. And I think if there's a lot of people that are getting less medical oversight than I would recommend to one of my friends or family, and that's problematic. And I think there's doctors that are really willing to write prescriptions for this stuff in ways that I don't think are probably the very best way to do it. So, I think there's an appropriate level of medical oversight, and that would be important. So
Yeah,
here's the picture.
yeah, and interesting to me. So, all right, let's move on to our next topic. AI. We've talked about this, but has it moved from answering questions to doing work? I think more and more people are using it and having agents, do things. Before this call, we were talking about future episodes. John, you asked, I've got an AI agent on the Hermes bot that's called Odin. And you said, have Odin do it. And Odin gave us 12 potential topics that I think we all thought were pretty good. So instead of we'd spent 10 minutes beating around and hadn't figured out a topic. And a couple of minutes, it gave us 12 that were pretty good. So that's one way we're using it. How are you guys using it? Right? I know I'm using the crap out of it, both, I can come back to that, but how are you guys using AI? And John, I know you use it a lot, and Anthony, you guys use it different. So John, go ahead first.
Yeah, I'm using it everywhere inside of my organization where administrative and companies often had kind of the line work and the staff work. And I think AI can be applied to both. We're applying it to staff work first. So things are highly repetitive. They can be done on their own, where the AI can actually work on its own, and both on a project basis, but also on a process basis. It's being consistently redone. One example would be pulling a scorecard for all the data that we need to do for analytics, both financial and activity analytics would be one place we're using it. Another place would be understanding how we pull content together and then packaging things for customers to make it easier. So there's a lot of deliverables we're using it for internally. And I think, AI, to me at least, is being used to get work done that wasn't being done or wasn't being done well enough in the past. My experience with technology is when technology comes out, it allows you to do more work, not the same work. And so I think some of the concern about, we'll have no work to do, I think is I think the concerns about people being displaced in the workforce, particularly those who aren't going to be learning new skills, those are real things that I think those fears are going to come to fruition.
Anthony?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm my own agent in a lot of ways, but I'm doing things that I've never done before. I'm asking questions that I never would have had the time to ask and get to the bottom of. It is an uber processor of information and data, and it's leading me down, getting the answers to questions that I've often had that I was never able to get the answers to, and I get it quickly, and I can get it from multiple sources to check to make sure I'm getting the same answer. So I'll use 2 or 3 different companies to ask the same question. It's just allowing me to be, really, really crisp in my decision making. So, I mean, it's amazing. I haven't, I don't have bots running. I don't have the need for that just yet. But man, it is making my life so much easier, and I'm much more effective. So.
Yeah, the other day I was sitting here and I'm working on a software project that literally 3 or 4 weeks ago I could not have done. That I've had Claude Code running basically 24/7 for more than 2 weeks now, working on this, and I wouldn't have been able to do this previously. So I've got Claude Code. I give it directions, telling it what to do. I open a different instance of Claude, and I'm having a discussion with it and a strategy session about how to take this to market. Something that would have taken hours and hours, and we're working through and talking about the pluses and minuses. I then, while it's running something and creating a marketing strategy, I go back to Claude Code. It's still running. I give it some updates, approve some things. I then open another version and I want it to create a spreadsheet taking our marketing approach and what I used to do creating these really, really detailed spreadsheets, sometimes I would spend days putting these when I was thinking about a business opportunity, like literally in between prompts on the other thing, I'm telling it what I want. And it takes 10 versions for me to get it exactly the way I want. But all in, I probably have 5 or 10 minutes of work into getting this really detailed spreadsheet. And oh, by the way, I've got Odin on another screen that at this point is mostly auto running things that, there's multiple tasks for this. I mean, Odin does more of the behind the scenes work right now than the three of us combined in a lot of ways, that is running automated, doing various tasks for the podcast. I'm not saying overall, but for the podcast. So it's pretty amazing. It's like I have all of these employees that are just going, and I have to just manage them, nudge them, direct them every now and sometimes they go down the, just like a human, sometimes they go down the wrong path. But man, the deeper I get in, the more ideas I get and the more capability. And it just, like I don't know, every step I take opens up 10 new doors that I can go through, which is a lot overwhelming, frankly.
Cool.
All right. Let's similar to that, the job market right now. This isn't the most abundance thing, but I think, we want to paint this and what do you do about it? And we've been talking about this, but there's a real thing. Like again, having a kid getting out of college, the job market right now is tough. Like recent college grads 4 or 5 years ago was one of the greatest job markets ever for college kids. And now, new unemployment claims last week were 208,000 unemployment claims. But
Compared to what, Randy? What's it normally?
I don't know. It's the lowest in 10
I'll find
weeks,
it.
though.
Okay.
So existing employees are keeping their old jobs, but it is, the economy added only 57,000 jobs in June, which, let me be clear, I do not trust the government numbers at all. Like those numbers will be adjusted almost guaranteed once and more likely 2 or 3 times. So whatever they say, 57,000, the those numbers, the main thing is the government estimates how many new businesses and how many new jobs are based every month, despite being in a digital world where they could pull the data. They've got some outdated algorithm that's never right. But it's hard for kids to get jobs right now. I'm watching that firsthand. So what's the solution? That's what I want to focus on is, yes, it's hard. Let's acknowledge it. But what do kids do? What do people do if they're trying to get in the job market now?
Well, wait a minute. There are job openings. I mean, what would was your first job the job you're doing now?
Good
No.
point.
And I mean, it just isn't. Your career, or your timeline, whatever you want to call it, is gonna change so there are enough openings in certain sectors of the economy for every single person who wants to work. Okay, there are. It may not be in the chosen field or your final destination, but if you want to earn a living, well, however meager you want to call it, you can do that. Do you know that what percent of the population is earning minimum wage? Do you guys know the answer to that?
Tiny.
Tell me.
It's less than 1%. It's less than 1%. So yeah, you might have to have roommates and live in a maybe not the best, living conditions or whatever the case might be, but you can get a job.
Anthony, I will say this. It's harder to find a job today than it was when I was looking for a job just out of college. Like there's no doubt about that at all. Like I think most people would report that. The jobs report says something similar. But I would just say this. I've got 2 kids that are, 21 and 23. Much more difficult to find work today than what I experienced coming out of college.
So you're telling me that they can't go and work at Buc-ee's or in a restaurant and get a server job that they can't get
Hard to
those jobs?
find. Like the number of applicants per job, much higher than it used to be. I had both of them apply for server jobs at multiple places, and one of them got one for a short period of time and was quickly laid off when the demand at that place went down and people wanted more shifts, more hours.
That's interesting because when I graduated college back in the late 70s, the unemployment rate was 14%. And today the government says, quote unquote, we're at full employment at 4%.
Yeah, they've changed the yardstick though. They're using a very different ruler. I think it's It's just hard. They keep changing the rules. Like back when in those days, once you were unemployed, you were unemployed. Now, if you're unemployed for like 3 months, they take you off the list, and there's a whole bunch of
Yeah,
things they've done to cook the
yeah,
books. So they're literally using a different ruler than they used then. I think the jobs that are available, I think we've done a disservice to kids in this generation that they, to Anthony's point, I do think a lot of them, not all, expect to start out as like the CEO or the president or a manager and not work their way up from the bottom. I think that's one of the things. But we've also done a huge disservice in the trades. I mean, I read a thing just a week or two ago, and I forget the exact time frame, but it was something like in the next 5 to 10 years, 65% of the electricians are going to retire. And we are not adding electricians. There's already a huge shortage of electricians. You hear these stories all the time about data centers that'll pay $250,000 for an electrician, or if they're willing to go to West Texas, I've heard numbers as high as $500,000 and even $750,000 to be an electrician. But most kids just don't want to do that. It's not sexy enough, or it's not the dream they've been sold. So I think there's some legitimacy in what Anthony said. And I think some of that is we've done this disservice telling everybody you've got to go to college, even if some of them get what are, in my opinion, BS degrees, right? They get these degrees that don't give them a skill set for the real world. And if people want to get degrees in that, they should be allowed to do so. They should just have different expectations of what kind of job offers are going to come their way if they go
yeah,
get those, what I would
Both
consider
and.
BS degrees.
yeah,
Both and.
Yeah.
yeah.
So I'm going to lean into our last topic. I think AI or go the other way. Either learn AI and you'll make yourself indispensable, and then the future, even if it's not clear now, 3 months, 6 months, whatever, you'll see opportunity. I believe that. Or go the other way and do the things that's going to be hardest for it to disrupt, whether it's people skills. We talked about problem solving earlier on this episode, electrician, plumber, like those are going to be safer longer than other stuff. But new opportunities coming. I think people just have to look for it and look for the job what's the job that's good now or 6 months from now or 6 years from now, not the one that was, there 6 years ago, because that is going to change.
All right, guys, well, let's wrap it up, Randy. Tell them what to do.
All right, download, subscribe, tell your friends, but just keep coming back and go out and spread a little abundance in the world. Until next week.
Talk to you later.